Do you know what stinks worse than cheap cologne? The stench of fraud wrapped in glossy social media filters. In Miami, you can rent a yacht, a mansion, or a billionaire persona, but you cannot fake a debt contract. When an arrogant punk used a legal loophole to steal my firm's assets and publicly humiliate me, he woke up a corporate monster. He loves live streaming fine. I will turn his biggest broadcast into a digital death sentence. Hello, everyone. Before today's story begins, we'd like to share a quick message. YouTube recently removed our monetization, cutting off our income. If you enjoy this story, we humbly ask for just $1 to help pay our staff so they can make a living and keep creating for you. Thank you for saving us. Now, let's begin the story. My name is Peyton Turner. I am 34 years old, and I serve as the Senior Vice President of Asset Recovery at Apex Horizon Capital. In the gleaming, sun-drenched playground of Miami, we are the apex predators. When a shell company bleeds out and dies, my firm swoops in to pick the carcass clean. It is not glamorous work, but it pays exceptionally well. People see the high-rise buildings, the swaying palm trees, and the pristine blue ocean, but beneath that perfect surface lies a foul swamp of toxic debt, offshore bank accounts, and corporate lies. My job is to wade into that dark swamp, find the hidden treasures, and drag back what rightfully belongs to our wealthy investors. On a humid Tuesday morning, a particularly complicated and foul file landed on my heavy mahogany desk. A tech startup shell company had just imploded, leaving behind millions of dollars in unpaid loans. My recovery team quickly secured the bank accounts, the server racks, and the office equipment, but the absolute crown jewel of their financial ledger was missing. It was a Porsche 911 GT3 RS. We are talking about a high-performance machine worth well over $350,000. You do not just misplace a bright yellow track vehicle in the middle of South Florida. I poured a cup of black coffee and went straight to work. Tracking missing money is a lot like tracking a bleeding animal in the winter snow. It always leaves a trail if you know exactly where to look. I bypassed the standard, slow legal inquiries and dove straight into the encrypted transaction metadata. The shell company's bankrupt chief executive officer had a distinct taste for high-end Miami nightclubs, and his credit card receipts told a fascinating, dirty story. He had been frequently splitting massive bar tabs with a local internet celebrity, a few keystrokes later, and a deep dive into local vehicle registration databases. I found our missing Porsche. It was currently sitting comfortably in the possession of Julian Sterling, better known to his teenage fan base as J-Dash. Julian was a self-proclaimed cryptocurrency investment master, a loud, obnoxious influencer boasting millions of followers who worshipped his every single word. He sold them a fake lifestyle of private jets, designer clothes, and unlimited passive wealth. But sitting in my quiet office, staring at his financial records, I saw right through the digital facade. Julian had never purchased the car. He had executed a fraudulent illegal asset transfer, barely 3 weeks before the startup officially declared bankruptcy. His drinking buddy, the disgraced executive, had quietly signed the Porsche over to Julian, labeling it as a vague consulting bonus. It was a classic, dirty maneuver designed purely to shield the valuable asset from ruthless creditors like me. I do not play games with amateur fraudsters. I immediately dispatched a formal, aggressively worded legal notice to Julian's registered business address. I delivered a strict 48-hour ultimatum to surrender the vehicle or face devastating legal action and asset freezing. I fully expected a panicked phone call from a lawyer trying desperately to negotiate a quiet settlement. Instead, I got a notification from a major social media platform. Julian had uploaded a brand new video. He was standing casually on the balcony of what looked like a luxury penthouse, wearing a ridiculous silk robe. In his hand was the formal demand letter I had personally signed just 24 hours earlier. He looked directly into the camera lens, flashed an arrogant smile, and said, "Look at this absolute garbage, guys. These Wall Street dinosaurs think they can intimidate me. They think they own the world." He then pulled out a heavy, solid gold lighter. He ignited the corner of my legal notice and used the burning paper to light a thick Cuban cigar. As the thick smoke plumed around his smug face, he tossed the flaming ashes over the balcony edge and laughed. "I am a forbidden zone, sweetheart," he declared to his millions of loyal viewers. "Your outdated corporate rules do not apply to me. Tell your boss that J- cannot be touched." Within just 2 hours, the video hit the top of the trending charts. It garnered millions of views, hundreds of thousands of likes, and a flood of comments praising him for bravely standing up to the evil capitalist machine. The internet crowned him a modern hero fighting against the wealthy elite. Back in my office, my phone started ringing uncontrollably. The board of directors at Apex Horizon Capital was absolutely furious. "We are a financial firm built on a reputation of absolute, cold-blooded ruthlessness. We simply do not get publicly mocked on the internet by a 20-something kid holding a cheap cigar." The managing partner walked straight into my office, slammed his hands violently onto my desk, and made the mandate crystal clear. The firm's entire prestige and market fear factor were on the line. I was to retrieve the Porsche at all costs, utilizing every single weapon in my vast arsenal. It was no longer just about recovering $350,000. It was about brutally making an example out of Julian Sterling, tearing down his fake empire brick by digital brick, and reminding the entire city of Miami exactly who runs the show. I moved fast, filing an emergency writ of replevin with the county civil court to seize the vehicle immediately. With a clear-cut case of fraudulent transfer, securing a judge's signature should have been a brief, 10-minute formality. Instead, I walked out of the heavy oak doors of the courtroom tasting bitter defeat. Julian had not spent his internet money on buying the car, but he had certainly spent it on a team of remarkably slick, morally bankrupt defense attorneys. They did not argue the merits of the transfer. Instead, they buried the judge in a mountain of fabricated jurisdictional paperwork. They had swiftly moved the title of the vehicle into an anonymous blind trust registered on a remote Caribbean island, exploiting a very specific, highly complex offshore loophole. The tired local judge, unwilling to untangle international corporate law on a Wednesday afternoon, slapped a stay on my order. He froze any legal dispute over the asset for 6 entire months pending an official review. 6 months. In the fast-paced world of digital finance, 6 months was an absolute eternity. By then, the vehicle would be stripped, crashed, or shipped overseas. Julian knew exactly what he had won. He did not just celebrate, he weaponized the legal victory. Over the next 2 weeks, he paraded the bright yellow machine across every corner of the city. My social media monitoring team watched in disgust as he posted a relentless barrage of videos. He parked it outside exclusive nightclubs, revved the engine through quiet residential neighborhoods, and used it as the ultimate shiny prop for his newest grift. He was heavily promoting a brand new, completely unregulated cryptocurrency token he called Hustle X. He stood on the hood of the car I was supposed to repossess, yelling into his phone camera, promising his gullible teenage followers that if they invested their life savings into his token, they would all be driving their own luxury cars by the end of the year. He was using our stolen asset to bait thousands of kids into a blatant financial trap. The peak of his toxic arrogance occurred exactly 12 days later. I was attending an exclusive, high-security charity gala hosted by the city's banking elite. It was a sophisticated evening of muted jazz, tailored velvet suits, and quiet conversations about billion-dollar mergers. I was standing near the grand marble entrance, sipping a glass of sparkling water, deep in conversation with 3 of the firm's most powerful institutional investors, trying to reassure them that the situation was under control. Then, the deafening scream of a modified exhaust pipe shattered the elegant atmosphere. The aggressive roar echoed off the grand valet canopy. Julian had arrived uninvited. He forcefully parked the stolen vehicle diagonally across the red carpet, completely blocking the entrance. The valets rushed forward, but he shoved past them. He was wearing an absurdly loud, neon-patterned designer jacket, holding his smartphone high in the air attached to a gimbal. He was already broadcasting live to hundreds of thousands of people. He spotted me immediately. A cruel, predatory grin spread across his face as he marched straight toward my group, completely ignoring the shocked stares of the city's wealthiest executives. "Well, well, well, look who we have here. Chat," Julian announced loudly, shoving the camera lens aggressively close to my face. "It is the big, scary corporate enforcer, or should I say, the skirt-wearing repo thug, who tried to steal my property and got absolutely humiliated in court by my legal team." My investors stiffened, visibly appalled by the vulgar intrusion. I stood perfectly still. I kept my posture rigid and my expression entirely blank, refusing to give him the emotional reaction he desperately craved for his audience. "What is the matter, Peyton?" he sneered, mispronouncing my name on purpose. "Cat got your tongue. You Wall Street suits think you run this city because you wear expensive clothes and drink overpriced garbage." Without breaking eye contact, Julian casually reached over and snatched a full flute of expensive champagne from a passing waiter's tray. He took a deliberate, mocking step closer to me. With a sudden, deliberate flick of his wrist, he tipped the crystal glass forward. The pale golden liquid splashed directly over the front of my tailored silk trousers and soaked into my favorite pair of imported leather heels. Gasps erupted from the surrounding crowd. My investors stepped back in absolute shock. Julian threw his head back and laughed, a harsh, grating sound that amplified through his live feed. The digital chat on his screen was a blur of rapid motion, thousands of anonymous users cheering him on, treating this blatant harassment as a triumphant victory for the common man against the greedy corporate machine. "Oops," he mocked, tossing the empty crystal flute onto the marble floor where it shattered into a dozen sharp pieces. "Send the cleaning bill to my office. Oh wait, you cannot even figure out where my assets are." He turned around and swaggered back to the roaring car, leaving me standing in a puddle of spilled wine and broken glass. I did not scream. I did not summon the private security guards to tackle him. I did not shed a single tear. I just watched him drive away, my eyes locked onto his taillights with a cold, terrifying clarity. 45 minutes later, I was sitting in the silent, dark interior of my own car parked inside my building's secure garage. I did not pick up my phone to call the firm's legal department. The legal department was bound by ethics, state laws, and professional boundaries. Julian had just proven that those rules were useless against a man who lived entirely in a lawless digital echo chamber. I reached into the passenger seat and pulled out my heavily encrypted personal laptop. The screen glowed faintly in the dark cabin. A standard, by-the-book repossession was far too humane for what had just transpired. Taking back the vehicle would no longer satisfy the debt he had just incurred. He had made it deeply, irreparably personal. I decided right then and there that I was not just going to take his car. I was going to systematically dismantle his entire fraudulent ecosystem, crush his fake reputation, and burn his digital empire straight to the ground. I needed leverage, the kind of dirty truth that does not exist on official public tax records. The next morning, I bypassed my firm's standard investigators and wired $30,000 from my discretionary fund to a group of gray hat data extractors I occasionally used for hostile corporate takeovers. They needed less than 48 hours to bypass his superficial security measures and crack open the rotting core of his digital life. The reality was delightfully pathetic. Julian Sterling was completely and utterly broke. The luxury penthouse he filmed his videos in was a short-term hourly rental. He actually lived out of a damp, illegally converted industrial warehouse on the bad side of town, constantly dodging aggressive calls from a dozen different payday loan agencies. He was drowning in personal debt. His credit score was practically non-existent, and he did not even own the flashy designer clothes he wore on camera. They were all heavily leased or counterfeit. The real horror, however, was buried deep within the smart contract codes of his upcoming project. My financial analysts tore apart the blockchain infrastructure of the HustleX token and found a textbook, undeniable Ponzi scheme. It was explicitly designed to funnel every single penny from new buyers directly into a hidden offshore digital wallet controlled exclusively by Julian. He was using our stolen bright yellow sports car as visual bait, a shiny metal lure to convince thousands of impressionable, desperate teenagers to empty their meager savings accounts and college funds into his massive scam. I sat alone in my office, staring at the damning spreadsheets illuminating my monitors. If I simply sent a heavy recovery crew to physically tow the vehicle away while he was sleeping, I would be playing right into his hands. He would immediately jump on a live broadcast, play the innocent victim oppressed by the greedy financial system, and his loyal fans would blindly donate enough money to buy him a brand new car. Reclaiming a depreciating asset was no longer the primary objective. To truly destroy a parasite like Julian, you cannot just cut off a limb. You have to eradicate his host. I had to shatter the blind faith of his audience, and I had to do it exactly at the moment he tried to steal their money. To build a flawless trap, I needed a rat inside his house. I scrutinized hundreds of hours of his behind-the-scenes footage, searching for the weak link in his daily operation. I found her standing just outside the spotlight. Her name was Maya. She was his primary videographer, video editor, and personal assistant. In every reflective surface captured on film, you could see her holding the heavy camera gear, looking chronically exhausted, physically drained, and deeply miserable. A quick, quiet sweep of her banking records confirmed my suspicion. Julian had not paid her a single dime in salary for over 5 straight months. He kept her chained to his side with empty promises of future equity and relentless emotional manipulation. I arranged a quiet meeting late Thursday evening at a dimly lit, obscure coffee shop far away from the popular influencer hotspots downtown. When Maya walked in, she looked terrified, nervously clutching a frayed canvas tote bag. I did not waste time with warm greetings. I slid a sleek black leather folder across the wooden table. "I know he owes you over $15,000 in back pay." "Maya," I said softly, keeping my voice perfectly even and clinical. "I know he treats you like garbage, and I know you are 3 weeks behind on your apartment rent." Maya stared at the dark folder, her hands trembling slightly. "Who are you? What do you want from me?" "I want to offer you a permanent exit strategy," I replied. "Open the folder." She slowly lifted the cover. Inside was a guaranteed, ironclad employment contract for a senior media producer position within the corporate communications department at Apex Horizon Capital. The starting salary was $120,000 a year, complete with full medical benefits and a $50,000 signing bonus, pre-approved and ready to clear into her bank account by the next morning. "You sign that paper, and your financial struggles end tonight," I told her, leaning slightly forward to command the space. "In exchange, you are going to help me permanently dismantle Julian Sterling. I need full access. I want his daily schedules, his network security protocols, and total control over his broadcast hardware." Maya looked down at the life-changing numbers printed on the crisp white paper. A single tear rolled down her cheek, but her tired eyes quickly hardened with a sudden, fierce resentment born from months of silent, grinding abuse. She reached into her bag, pulled out a cheap plastic pen, and signed her name on the dotted line with aggressive force. "He is hosting the biggest launch event of his life this coming Saturday," Maya said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper as she slid a heavily encrypted hard drive across the table toward me. "He is doing a massive live stream to officially launch the token. He expects over 250,000 people to tune in and buy the coin the second the website goes live. He rented out Pelican Pier, a private dock right on the water. He wants the luxury boat, the ocean background, and the car all in the frame to look like a self-made billionaire." I smiled, feeling a cold rush of anticipation. The hackers had given me the motive. Maya had just given me the perfect execution chamber. The stage was finally set for a very public execution. The intelligence Maya provided was as precise as a surgeon's scalpel. She handed over the exact geographical coordinates and structural blueprints of Pelican Pier, an aging but exclusive private dock jutting out into the deep waters of the bay. Julian had specifically chosen this isolated location to control the environment for his massive broadcast. According to his highly detailed production schedule, He planned to park the stolen bright yellow sports car mere inches from the concrete edge of the pier. He wanted the vast, glittering expanse of the Atlantic Ocean framing the background, creating the ultimate visual illusion of boundless wealth and maritime luxury. However, Pelican Pier was strictly private property, protected by a heavy iron gate and private security guards. If I simply sent a standard repossession team with a flatbed truck, Julian's hired muscle would lock the gates, stall for time, and turn the situation into a chaotic physical standoff while his cameras rolled. He would twist the narrative into a live assault. I needed absolute, unassailable jurisdiction. I did not bother filing for another useless repossession permit. Instead, I dug into the commercial property records of the county. The man who owned Pelican Pier was a struggling real estate developer currently drowning under a commercial mortgage default of $2,500,000. Utilizing the vast liquid capital reserves of Apex Horizon Capital, I executed a hostile debt buyout. I quietly purchased the developer's entire distressed loan portfolio from his terrified community bank at a steep discount. By 4 o'clock on Friday afternoon, I had executed a rapid foreclosure clause hidden deep within the original contract language. Without a single public announcement, my firm became the absolute legal owner of the entire Pelican Pier facility for a crucial window of 24 hours. I did not just have the right to be there, I owned the very ground he was standing on. With the territory secured, I completely discarded the idea of using a traditional automotive towing company. A tow truck could easily be blockaded on a narrow access road. Instead, I turned my attention to the open water. I contacted a specialized heavy marine salvage operator located just down the coastline. These were the rugged men who pulled sunken commercial fishing vessels off the ocean floor, not the people who picked up illegally parked sedans. I wired them an upfront operational fee of $75,000 to charter a massive industrial barge equipped with a heavy-duty, commercial-grade lifting crane. We meticulously plotted the nautical charts and tidal patterns. The captain confirmed he could silently anchor the massive steel vessel in the deep channel directly adjacent to the pier, completely out of the direct line of sight of Julian's land-based camera angles. While the physical trap was being set, I prepared the lethal blow for his financial scam. A simple repossession would humiliate him, but the law needed to physically remove him from the board. I compiled every single piece of encrypted data, offshore routing numbers, and fake smart contract code my gray hat hackers had extracted regarding the Hustle X token. I placed the massive dossier onto a secure flash drive and dispatched it via bonded courier directly to the senior agent in charge of the Financial Crimes Division at the Federal Bureau of Investigation headquarters downtown. I included a very precise, undeniable timeline of when the illegal wire transfers would officially go live during the broadcast. The federal agents did not need to know about my repossession operation. They only cared about stopping a massive interstate wire fraud scheme in progress. I carefully calibrated the intelligence drop to ensure their tactical raid units would mobilize at the exact minute I required them to. Inside Julian's camp, Maya was flawlessly executing her role as my silent saboteur. On Friday evening, while Julian was busy taking mirror selfies at the gym, Maya was supposedly cleaning the interior of the sports car in preparation for the big show. In reality, she was methodically stripping away his escape routes, following a set of complex technical instructions my security team had provided. She spliced a hidden GPS transmitter into the vehicle's diagnostic port. More importantly, she accessed the central computer module and quietly introduced a malicious software patch. With a few keystrokes on her tablet, she completely fried the electronic locking mechanisms and disabled the ignition immobilizer from the inside. The bright yellow machine might look like a roaring beast, but structurally, it was now nothing more than a very expensive, paralyzed paperweight. It could not be started, and the doors could not be electronically unlocked once they were shut. By midnight on Friday, the board was set. Every single piece of the elaborate puzzle was locked into position. I stood alone on the expansive glass balcony of my high-rise apartment, holding a glass of aged whiskey. The warm coastal wind whipped through my hair as I looked out over the dark, sprawling expanse of the Miami coastline. Somewhere out there in the dark water, my industrial salvage barge was quietly moving into position. Somewhere in the city, federal agents were briefing their tactical entry teams, and somewhere in a damp warehouse, a foolish boy was sleeping soundly, dreaming of millions of dollars, entirely unaware that the morning sun would bring the absolute destruction of everything he had ever built. I took a slow sip of the burning liquor and smiled into the darkness. The hunt was over. It was time for the slaughter. At exactly 12 o'clock noon on Saturday, the digital curtain finally rose. Julian stood triumphantly at the very edge of the concrete pier, bathed in the harsh, unforgiving glare of the midday sun. He was dressed impeccably for a high-stakes con artist, wearing a custom-tailored, shimmering emerald silk suit that caught the ocean light with his every exaggerated, arrogant movement. He leaned casually, almost affectionately, against the brilliant yellow hood of the stolen sports vehicle. The endless, sparkling expanse of the deep blue Atlantic Ocean stretched out flawlessly behind him. It was the perfect, meticulously manufactured image of limitless prosperity and untouchable success. "Listen to me, hustle family," Julian barked into the high-definition lens, flashing his artificially whitened teeth with practiced precision. "This is ground zero. This is the exact moment your entire financial life changes forever. The portal is officially open. Do not be the pathetic loser left crying on the sidewalk while we all fly to the moon. Empty those savings accounts, max out those credit cards, and buy the token right now." Less than half a mile away, tucked securely inside the heavily tinted, climate-controlled cabin of a mobile command vehicle, I sat in a plush leather chair and watched his sickening performance unfold across a massive bank of glowing monitors. I lifted a steaming paper cup to my lips, took a slow, deliberate sip of bitter black coffee, and pressed the transmit button on my encrypted tactical radio. "Initiate the purge," I said coldly. Out on the sun-baked pier, Maya stood barely 5 feet away from Julian, balancing the heavy primary broadcasting camera on her bruised shoulder. Her face remained a perfect mask of professional exhaustion, but her thumb rested securely on a small, modified remote control hidden deep inside her canvas pocket. Without a flinch, she pressed the button. Instantly, a localized, military-grade signal jammer concealed within her equipment bag powered up. It silently and viciously severed the broadband connections of Julian's entire production crew. The local internet routers died in a fraction of a second, before the broadcast could drop and trigger an automatic fail-safe shutdown. Maya's pre-programmed script seamlessly rerouted the massive, high-definition video feed through a hidden, high-band satellite uplink she had covertly established that very morning. In the blink of an eye, Julian's entire technical team lost all administrative control. The live stream was no longer theirs to command. It belonged entirely to me. I now held absolute, unchallengeable authority over what hundreds of thousands of people were watching. The viewer count on the top right corner of the primary screen was ticking upward at an explosive, intoxicating rate. 250,000, 280,000. Exactly when the counter breached the staggering 300,000 mark, I gave my secondary signal. At the far end of the narrow access road leading onto the pier, 2 massive black sport utility vehicles violently skidded into a blocking formation, kicking up clouds of white dust. 6 towering security operatives, dressed in immaculate black suits bearing the discreet silver emblem of Apex Horizon Capital, stepped out with military precision. They swiftly wrapped thick, heavy steel chains around the primary iron gates of the facility and snapped a heavy industrial padlock shut. The metallic clank echoed ominously all the way down the dock. Julian was officially caged. He did not notice the physical trap closing around him quite yet, because his frantic eyes were glued to the digital monitor displaying the live interactive chat. His arrogant, practiced smile began to falter, slowly twisting into a deeply confused and horrified grimace. The cascading waterfall of celebratory fire emojis and digital dollar signs had suddenly, violently stopped. The chat was rapidly turning toxic, flooded with thousands of panicked, angry, and aggressive messages scrolling faster than he could read. "My transaction failed," one user wrote in all capital letters. "The major exchange just flagged the smart contract," wrote another. "Guys, the primary digital wallet is frozen. It says suspected major fraud. We cannot buy in. He is scamming us." Julian's perfectly rehearsed composure shattered into a million pieces. The slick, untouchable billionaire persona evaporated into thin air, instantly replaced by the frantic, sweat-drenched panic of a trapped, desperate animal. He wildly yelled at his technical director, demanding to know why the network was completely down and why he could not access the primary financial dashboard. The director was helplessly smashing his palms against the keys of a dead laptop, screaming that they were completely locked out of their own system. Realizing that his entire criminal operation was collapsing in real time on a global stage, and finally noticing the terrifying men in black suits standing guard at the distant locked gate, Julian made a desperate, instinctive dash for his ultimate status symbol. He lunged toward the bright yellow sports vehicle, aggressively grabbing the driver's side door handle and pulling with absolutely all his might. Nothing happened. The electronic locks were completely dead. He yanked it again, his knuckles turning pure white, cursing violently under his breath. Maya's brilliant digital sabotage from the night before held firm. The car was a sealed, impenetrable, dead vault. He pounded his fists frantically against the reinforced safety glass, screaming senselessly at the lifeless leather interior. He was completely humiliatingly locked outside of his own stolen getaway vehicle. Just as the crushing, suffocating reality of his absolute helplessness washed over him, a horrifying sound ripped through the salty air. It was a massive, bone-rattling, deep-throated blast from an industrial pneumatic horn. The deafening noise tore through the quiet coastal atmosphere, vibrating the solid concrete directly beneath Julian's expensive leather shoes. Slowly, violently, churning the dark ocean water into a white foam. A massive steel salvage barge emerged from the blind spot directly behind the pier, casting a giant, terrifying, inescapable shadow over him and his useless, silent machine. The air directly above the harbor suddenly fractured. A rhythmic, concussive thumping tore through the previously quiet coastal sky, easily drowning out the frantic, pathetic screams of the trapped internet influencer. A sleek, matte black executive helicopter descended rapidly from the low-hanging clouds, its massive twin rotors kicking up a vicious, chaotic vortex of warm wind and salty sea spray. It hovered aggressively for a brief, terrifying moment before touching down smoothly on the expansive, heavily reinforced steel deck of my industrial salvage barge. The side cabin door slid open with a sharp mechanical hiss. I stepped out into the chaotic, swirling wind. I was wearing an immaculate, perfectly tailored white silk suit, a stark and deliberate visual contrast to the dark, dirty, ruthless business of corporate asset recovery. My hair whipped fiercely around my face in the violent ocean breeze, but my posture remained absolutely rigid and unbreakable. I walked deliberately to the edge of the thick metal railing, looking down from my superior vantage point at the concrete pier where Julian stood completely frozen in sheer, unadulterated terror. Down on the sun-baked pier, Maya did exactly what she was so handsomely paid to do. She did not flinch, and she certainly did not pan the camera away to spare his dignity. She aggressively adjusted the heavy professional lens of her primary broadcast camera, zooming in tightly to capture the catastrophic, pale horror violently washing over Julian's sweating face. She held on his terrified expression for 5 agonizing seconds before swiftly panning the lens upward to frame my dominant, towering presence standing on the massive ship looming above him. Hundreds of thousands of viewers were watching this unedited, brutal, high-definition reality unfold in absolute real time. I picked up a heavy, commercial-grade public address megaphone resting on the steel railing. I brought the cold plastic to my lips. My voice echoed with deafening, inescapable, godlike authority across the entire marina. bleeding directly into his hijacked, crystal-clear microphone feed. "Julian Sterling," I announced smoothly, the mechanical amplification making the crisp words strike him like physical, heavy blows to the chest. "This entire pier is now the legal, private commercial property of Apex Horizon Capital. Your fraudulent cryptocurrency project is absolute, verifiable garbage, and most importantly, this vehicle was never yours to begin with." Julian's face instantly contorted into a hideous mask of pure, unhinged, helpless fury. He screamed a continuous string of violent, completely incoherent curses into the wind, his vocal cords cracking under the immense, sudden strain of his collapsing reality. He took 2 aggressive, foolish steps toward the concrete edge of the water, raising his trembling fists as if he were actually going to try and leap across the churning ocean gap to physically attack me. But before his frantic brain could even process another stupid thought, the towering industrial heavy-lifting crane mounted on my barge roared to life. The massive steel gears ground together with an earth-shaking, metallic screech that vibrated deep in the chest. A heavy, reinforced iron spreader bar plummeted from the sky with terrifying velocity, casting a massive, dark shadow directly over the bright yellow Porsche 911 GT3 RS, 4 heavily tattooed. Massive marine salvage divers leapt off the lower deck of the barge onto the pier with staggering, practiced speed. They completely ignored Julian, treating the screaming boy like a harmless, buzzing insect. In less than 30 seconds, they slid 4 ultra-high tensile woven steel cables directly under the reinforced carbon fiber chassis of the vehicle, locking the heavy industrial safety hooks into place with a series of sharp, decisive, metallic snaps. The salvage foreman, standing on the pier, raised his calloused hand and sharply blew a shrill silver whistle. Up in the glass control booth, the crane operator threw the massive hydraulic throttle lever backward. The thick steel cables ripped completely taut with a terrifying, agonizing groan of immense physical tension. The advanced racing suspension of the bright yellow machine stretched dangerously upward, the expensive rubber tires desperately clinging to the concrete surface for one final, pathetic fraction of a second before gravity was completely conquered. The incredibly heavy vehicle was violently yanked straight into the sky. It swung helplessly 15 feet above the dark, unforgiving, swirling waters of the Atlantic Ocean. It swayed gently back and forth in the strong coastal wind, totally stripped of its incredible speed, its roaring power, and its arrogant, untouchable symbolism. It was now nothing more than a heavy, useless piece of metal caught permanently in my steel trap. Through Maya's flawless high-definition broadcast feed, over 350,000 people watched the ultimate shiny icon of his fake wealth dangling by a literal thread over the deep, watery abyss. The digital chat room on the live feed exploded into a state of absolute, vicious anarchy. The blind worship from his teenage fans was instantly and ruthlessly replaced by merciless, coordinated digital mockery. The glossy, perfectly curated illusion was completely, permanently, and violently shattered. The brutal reality of the situation finally broke completely through Julian's thick, narcissistic skull. The fake billionaire persona evaporated entirely into the hot Miami air. His knees instantly buckled beneath his own weight. He collapsed heavily onto the hard, unforgiving, dirty concrete of the pier. The expensive silk fabric of his emerald green suit ripped violently against the rough ground. But he did not even seem to register the physical damage. He threw his trembling hands out toward the hovering barge, heavy, ugly tears streaming down his face, completely destroying his carefully applied television makeup. He sobbed uncontrollably, begging and pleading at the very top of his lungs. "Please," he wailed loudly, his voice reduced to a pathetic, broken, mucus-filled rasp. "Put it down. Please. I am begging you. That is my entire life. You are ruining my life. I will do absolutely anything. I swear to God. Just put the car back on the ground." He was no longer a defiant, untouchable internet god, bravely fighting the financial establishment. He was just a terrified, broken, miserable little boy crying uncontrollably over a stolen toy he could never actually afford. I looked down at his pathetic, weeping form with absolutely zero pity in my heart. The complicated knot I had so carefully and methodically tied was finally ready to be pulled completely tight. A sudden, chaotic chorus of deafening, high-pitched emergency sirens violently erupted from the quiet city streets immediately behind the pier. Half a dozen heavily armored, matte black federal law enforcement tactical vehicles smashed straight through the heavy iron gates I had padlocked just minutes prior. The heavy steel security chains snapped identically, like brittle wooden twigs under the massive, unstoppable weight of the armored crisis trucks. Heavily armed federal agents from the Federal Bureau of Investigation poured rapidly out of the idling vehicles, their heavy tactical boots pounding rhythmically against the concrete as they aggressively swarmed the location with military precision. The flashing red and blue emergency lights reflected beautifully off the dangling yellow car and the dark ocean water. I allowed myself a slow, deeply satisfied, cold smile. I calmly raised my right hand and gave a sharp, precise downward signal to the crane operator. The massive internal gears shifted, and the bright yellow sports car was gently, safely lowered onto the secure, flat steel deck of my salvage barge. I turned my back to the chaotic, screaming scene unfolding down on the pier. I did not bother to look back, even as Julian screamed in absolute, breathless, animalistic despair, while three heavily armed federal agents forcefully pinned him face down against the rough concrete. Locking heavy steel handcuffs tightly around his wrists for the entire world to witness on his very own live stream, the corporate game was officially over. The stolen asset was successfully recovered. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. We hope you enjoyed it. As an ad-free channel, your support is what keeps us alive. Please support Boss Revenge Stories with just $1 via the QR code on the screen, or click the link in the description box or pinned comment. Also, we would love to connect with you. Please leave a comment telling us which city or state you are listening from. Thank you for standing with us, and see you in the next stories.